Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to start promptly because we've got quite a lot to talk about. It's 2 o'clock. We'll see some stragglers come in, but as and when they do, that's fine. We are recording today, as we do every week. So if anybody doesn't want to appear on camera, turn your camera off, put yourself to mute. Otherwise, the recording will be posted after the show and tell. Lots to talk about in terms of discovery and thinking and testing this week, but I'm going to talk briefly about what show and tells are, why we do them, and how we work before we go into that. If you've been here before, you'll have heard me talk about this before, but always useful for those people who turn up for the first time. So this is show and tell 29. Or number 4, depending on how you look at it. We had a mini break in between the 2 contracts with Unboxed, and we've now got, this is the 4th show and tell of our new contract, which will run for the next 12, 15, 18 months. So what is a show and tell? It's really our chance to tell you what we're doing. So keeping people updated on where the project is, provide an opportunity for feedback. So the chat is open. If anybody wants to raise questions, always can do that. But we really want to try as much as possible to be as open as we can to share what we're thinking, what's coming next, and get that feedback. The way that we're approaching this project is the same as it's always been. So we've been building, measuring, learning and sharing, and putting a continuous loop on that. We don't tend to go big bang with things. Things tend to start with what we call a minimum viable product, and then we iterate and test around that. And even before we deliver a minimum viable product, it will have been through several rounds of testing and iteration based on the hypothesis that we put forward at the beginning. But we'll see a little bit more about testing and how we do that a little bit later. Our vision, we will give our residents more free time by making everything they do with the council faster and easier. A pretty broad overarching statement, but it really is at the fundamental core of everything that we're trying to deliver. It's really important to us. We think that it's important to our users, and everything that we're doing is focused on delivering best benefit for our users, commonly called user-centered design. It's really what drives what we do. Not necessarily always what the service wants or what the business thinks it wants, but very much focused on what the user needs are. So what are we doing? As you know, we went through the process of unification of 4 district councils and the legacy county council to deliver one new Buckinghamshire council, which is just over a year old. So we're rationalising and migrating the content from all of those old legacy sites, those 4 district and the county site, onto one new buckinghamshire.gov.uk site. And we're doing that over the next 12 months or so. We've actually been doing it over the last 12 or 15 months, but we got sort of busy along the way with COVID and various other things. And alongside that, we're developing new digital services, which are a little bit more of a deeper technical dive into things like payments or planning applications or any of those kind of things that we're looking at, more from a technical integration perspective than from a pure content perspective. So who's doing it? It's the digital team is relatively small, perfectly formed, but relatively small. Myself, Dominic and Jez, who are all on the call, we work very closely with lots of other teams in the organisation, most notably Colin Harris's team in the web content team. So we're obviously lots of overlap between what his team does and what my team does. But we're working closely together to make sure that we don't trip each other up or trip over each other at any point. On top of that, we've got a large external team. So our lead digital agency is a company called Unboxed. They're our kind of delivery partner. They form a consortium with a number of other teams, one of which is focused on the technical development, so new code, front end and back end development, which is a company called Torchbox. And then we have a company called Scroll, who are, you'll hear from one of their people later on, and very much focused on copy design and editing, and what our strategy is around particular elements of content and how we deliver that. And then every service team in the council. So at some point, nearly everybody has content on one of the old websites. We will be talking to all of those people as we start to migrate their content from the old websites onto the new one. Very quickly, I'll go through this very quickly, and it really just gives you an overview of how we do that kind of content design process, all the way from the kickoff meeting to agree ways of working, a lot of which is contained in this slide, through that auditing of content, mapping user journeys, collecting feedback from product owners, iterating based on feedback from them, testing with real users, and then collaborating with the product owner again based on the back of those testing findings, iterating again, and then starting to write content. David will talk a little bit later on about the work that he's been doing, which starts with writing some of that content, which we then test and iterate. And then we do that again and again, and until we get it what we hope to be right. And then final sign off with the product owner, and then we publish it. And we publish it to the live site. Now, it's not the case that it will never get changed again. If we see that it's failing in some way or that we think it could be improved, then we will go back through that process again and reiterate. But ultimately, it's quite a long path to getting to actually publishing stuff to the live site. So what have we done in the last couple of weeks? So Sarah's going to talk about parking and client transport and highways. I'll let her talk about that. Revs and bends, as you're aware, revs and bends is one of those big areas that the districts used to do. Was one of their primary functions. That's now come over into the newer organisation where a lot of those systems are coming together. Dominic James, who's part of the digital team in my team, is currently looking at rationalising content, rationalising systems. We have a new customer portal coming in December. So a huge amount of work going on in Revs and Bends space, both from our side, but also from the Revs and Bends team side as well. And then Lil's going to talk a little bit about planning. Planning, again, a huge element of our site. There's an awful lot of planning pages scattered over the old district sites and also the old county site as well. You can see some of the things that we're kind of wrapping up and are still ongoing, things that are lasting longer than a sprint. We've done some more accessibility work. Accessibility for us is a real core key component of our website. Our website needs to be accessible, both because it's better for customers, but also because it's a legal requirement for us. And we're also continuing to work through new workflows to help content editors and service owners. Anybody who's ever had to approve web pages will know that at the moment the process can be a little clunky. Sometimes we have to email you PDFs, which are screenshots of those web pages as they're being built. In the future, when we have a new staging or pre-production environment, we'll be actually able to send you a URL so that you can go and see those pages as they will appear for the end user. And judging from conversations we started having today, actually be able to make comments on those pages as well. So actually, as we implement new versions of our content management system, you may well be able to make comments a bit like you can in Google Docs or Microsoft Word. It's add a comment in and almost track changes. So that will really help in terms of our ability to deliver that. So I'm going to pass over quickly now, I think, to Sarah, who's going to talk about parking and client transport and highways. I will advance on your command.
Thank you. So next slide, please. Thank you. So today we're going to talk about parking. So to keep it very simple and bring some focus, what we're trying to do and the problem we're trying to solve can be summarized in one question. So how do users expect to find parking related content on the Buckinghamshire website? So to answer this question, I've been working very closely with David McComb, who is our content designer, and we also deployed some UX research methodology. So the main objective we have behind this question is to actually work and review the information architecture. So for those who are not necessarily familiar with this term, the information architecture is basically the way we organize and and label the content in a way that users can find actually what they are looking for when they visit the website. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So to do it, David has been making an assessment on the existing content on parking, but also reorganizing the information architecture, so reorganizing the way the content is organized. And then he basically rewrote the content in a way that it's in plain English, and hopefully it is understandable by absolutely everyone. So then the next stage for us was to actually expose this work to real users and to see how they will understand it or not. So for this, we did deploy a click test. So a click test is essentially, it's very simple. You might have seen it before in previous show and tell. You might have even participated to some of them. We usually ask a simple task to the user, a task which is, well, as real as possible. And then the users can just click on the page which is presented in front of him or her, and then see whether or not it's matching with what we expect from them. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we deployed this click test over a week, so between the 4th of May and the 11th of May. We had an amazing participation. I was really happy about that. We had 119 participants, which is brilliant because it's just a nice way for us to actually read patterns and see the trends, so see what's working, see what's not working. And then we tested 15 different tasks. Next slide, please. So the analysis is actually a work in progress, and it is being driven by my colleague called Tom Gaylor, who you will meet later on in an upcoming show and tell. And what Tom is actually doing at the moment is basically analyzing those tests. And I thought it would be nice to share with you an example. So here is one. So a plumber is coming to my house to fix my boiler. How can I get a pass for them to park on the street outside my house? And then we presented this version of the parking page in front of the user. And our hypothesis is that the user will, well, hopefully click on parking permits and car park season ticket, because this is where we believe that the correct answer should be actually sitting. But also, we also considered at the top of the screen the search bar, which is another way to get access to the content, even if it's not direct. And then the last hypothesis we had was for the user to actually go down to the footer, potentially, to click on Contact Us, to then have access to the answers to this question. So if we go to the next slide, please. So here's the finding. So we were not quite right on this one, so I picked up this one in particular just to see and understand basically people's logic. So what we can see is that most people will actually have it right, so in the way we understood it. So we are talking about 64% will actually click on parking permits and car park season ticket, which is great. However, we can also see that it's not that clear for some users, because they will expect to find the answer to their question on the first one, which is parking suspension and, oops, can't read it. Sorry, parking suspension and dispensation, sorry. Thank you. So basically, it's giving us a hint about what's working, which is great, because, well, we can see that 64% will have it right, and hopefully they will find answer to their questions. In this one, no one has actually considered Contact Us. Well, why not? And then no one has also considered using the search bar, which is okay. But what is really important here is that we have one person out of three which might unfortunately go for a ride before finding his answer. And obviously we need to acknowledge it, we need to actually embrace it, but also do something about it. So this will be basically coming up after the full analysis to see how we can better equip the user to find answer to his questions. And that's it actually for the parking analysis for the moment. Now we are going to talk about client transport. So for client transport, we have a content designer who is actually leading it, Jennifer Hodgson. So I will basically go through her notes to explain where we are. So thank you. So for this sprint, basically, from the previous sprint, we collected some information from the client transport team. So they have been very kind to actually share quite a lot of data with us. And from it, we actually put together, and Jen mostly did the full hard job of putting together some findings. And the findings basically from this discovery there were three main findings. The first one is that there is a need for providing faster and simpler journeys to enable the users to complete his task. The second was a need to better communicate processes and timelines to the users to manage their expectations. And then the third one was to offer there is a need basically to offer a better user experience to parents to determine whether or not their child is eligible for a certain type of transport. So those were the key findings. From that, Jen has been working on a new information architecture. She also collected basically some feedback from the client transport team. And then the next steps which have been decided, if we move to the next slide, here we go, will be to essentially do a workshop together because there are many journeys which are basically sitting within the client transport. And the idea will be to focus on three key journeys, mapping them out because the journeys are not just existing on the website, some are also outside the website. So there are communications such as letter, which are part of the user experience. So we need to map those journeys first. We need to identify the pain point within this journey. Then after that, we need to understand what is changeable, what can be improved. And then finally, the idea will be to optimize those journeys. So this will be upcoming for the next sprint, hopefully. And next slide, please. Highway, yes. For highways, so Jen has been doing quite a lot of work on this one as well to put together a new information architecture. And then in terms of discovery, I'm going to read it to make sure I'm not missing anything. So what came out was that there was a need to consolidate, rationalize, and reorganize the existing content, just to make sure that the user understands it once again. There was a second thing which is very important, which was to move away from inaccessible PDF, because that's not really a good practice. And then the last one was to offer shorter and easier journeys to the user. So again, there is a need to optimize the journeys. So next slide, please. Here we go. So once the IA is going to be reviewed and confirmed by the team, the idea will be to do exactly what we are doing for the parking, which means testing DIA by exposing it to user and organizing a click test. And that's it for highway. Thank you very much. And I'll pass over to David. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. So if we could have the first slide, please. So at the last show and tell, I spoke about the user testing sessions we are developing for revenues and benefits content, and I introduced the moderated usability test we're going to be working on. For those who weren't here last time, during a moderated usability test, we speak to one user at a time and give them a series of tasks to complete based on the new content structure and new content pages we've drafted. During the test, we ask users to talk out loud so that we understand the decisions they make and what's going through their head when looking for content. The sessions are recorded and teams can also watch live, which is a valuable way to see how real people interact with our pages and highlights issues and problems we may not have considered when developing content. The test we're working on will look at both the Revs and Bens content structure or information architecture that Dominic James and his colleagues developed, and the user-led approach to content we are adopting across the whole Bucks site. So next slide, please. During the user testing sessions, we will ask participants to find content, often starting from the Bucks homepage. I therefore have drafted new link text for the Bucks homepage, but which only focuses on the council tax, benefits and business sections. I've also drafted new content for the index pages that sit below the homepage, which Sarah and Caroline from Unboxed will be building in the coming days. We will then be able to test if users can find content we ask them to locate and if our approach to writing the links is logical and intuitive. Next slide, please. For the testing sessions, I have also written a series of content pages, which again will cover the council tax, benefits and business sections. I have adopted a user-led approach to this content and used language that is direct, easy to understand, and will help users to complete tasks quicker and find information they need with ease. I am also using lots of content design tricks to make the pages less dense and suitable for viewing on a small mobile screen, with buttons, collapsible sections and so on, helping to streamline the pages and lead users by the hand to help them find what they need. I'm currently working with Dominic to polish the final content pages and make them as good as they can be for testing. And next week, Sarah and Caroline should have everything they need to build the tests, write a script for the testing session, and begin the process of recruiting participants. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Oh, hi.
Sorry, I was just going to pass over to Lil.
Thanks, Pete. I'm Lil Boyce. I've been working with my content colleague, Eva Dyer, to prepare for the rationalization and migration of planning and building control content to the new site. If you were here at last show and tell, you will have met Eva Dyer, and she introduced what we've been up to in our discovery phase. Next slide, please. So we've spent a couple of weeks learning about service teams and their goals. So we've been interviewing the different teams in planning and building control, and we still are. We've been digging into existing research in this space and also reviewing customer complaints around building and planning control, planning and building control, and auditing hundreds and hundreds of pages of existing content and traffic. Next slide, please. So there's a lot to digest in all of that, but we wanted to share some of the things that we've been finding already. So to begin with, viewing planning applications is really clearly the top task for users in planning. The pages that allow users to get to the planning portal to look at planning applications are by far and away the most popular pages across all 4 district sites. It's also interesting to note that some users, not the majority, but there are some users who will put the planning application reference or the property address, so you can see some examples on the right there, straight into the site-wide search bar from the home page or from the top of the page. So that's just an indication of how keen users are to just get on with that task. It's probably fair to say that when residents are viewing planning applications, they want to keep an eye on what's going on in their area, but they might also want to have their say. They might want to comment on those applications. And there are ways that they can engage with the planning process. However, when we looked at customer complaints, it showed us that residents aren't always clear about how they can engage with the planning process and how they can have their say. So next slide, please. This is a customer complaint from a resident who wanted to find out how they could object to a development in their area. So as you can see, this user probably feels like they're being ignored, their time's being wasted. They're certainly not finding a way forward with what they want to do, and they're perhaps not even clear about kind of the boundaries on what they can do there. Next slide, please. We also found similar pain points for customers who are checking what they need to do before they can start building or improving their property. So I've got a customer complaint from a user who was trying to find out if they needed permission before they started doing some home improvements. Next slide, please. So this user actually had quite a long and complicated journey. It involved getting some information on the phone, some email advice, looking at some things they were pointed towards online and doing their own online research. And along the way, they got one bit of advice saying they needed planning permission and one bit of advice saying they needed building regulations approval. Now, it's quite possible that they needed both, but they found this confusing and they thought that the two bits of advice were contradictory. So they spent some time trying to clarify this. In the meantime, they lost their builder and they gave up. Next slide, please. We also did a bit of digging in existing research from things like Hackney's Submit My Planning Application process. And we can see that they've observed that there are those pain points for their users. Well, general public users don't understand the planning process very well, and the planning jargon that's used is a barrier to understanding for them. There are certainly users who do know something about the planning process. So professional users like builders and architects and agents have a better chance of navigating the planning process, although it's not always easy, and they have a better chance of understanding the terminology. But we think it's a bit unfair to expect residents to look under planning or building control or planning enforcement for the information they need, because they may not be thinking in those terms in the first place, and they may never find the information they need to do what they set out to do. So we think there's an opportunity here to reorganize the content based on user needs, so we can help users find what they need quickly. So for example, thinking about users who want to check what they have to do before they start building or improving their property, and giving them a way in to understanding how the different bits of the planning process apply to them, and giving them an overview before we send them further down their journey to investigate making a planning application. So with this in mind, our next step is to start co-designing a new content structure or a new IA, as Sarah's explaining, with our product owner in planning and building control, Alistair Nicholson, and then testing that with users in the ways that Sarah and David have already outlined. And we'll be focusing on beginning that process in our next sprint. So thanks, and back to you, Pete.
So thank you very much. So here you'll be able to see some of the things that we're going to be doing next sprint. I think David and Sarah and Lil have probably outlined some of that that we've got coming, that moderated usability testing, confirming the IA and launching tests around highways, and hopefully setting up those workshops with client transport. That's it for today. You've got about 30 seconds left before the end of the meeting. And next show and tell, 27th of May. I will put some stuff in the chat about the specific questions that have been raised in there. But if anybody else had any quick questions they wanted to pose, otherwise I'll let you go on your way. And happy Thursday. Okay, thank you very much. As my puppy kicks off. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.